Hi, I'm Brendia Miller, just a girl who feels like she barely survived from being 18 to 29, from an abusive marriage to divorce, pregnant with my sweet girl to the mom of an angel, and this was all before I was even 20. Since then, I married the high school sweetheart, had a sweet boy, wrote a few books, blogs, and in 9 years, 3 states, 4 cities, 13 homes, 2 hotels, 1 angel girl, 1 sweet boy, a bunch of jobs, and an insane amount of love and laughter. Here I am, 30 years old, talking to you, sharing my wisdom from the infinite lessons I have learned while still learning to navigate around the things that I haven't. Come along and navigate with me. There is room here for your joy, your grief, your hormones, your emotions, your friendships, relationships, heartbreak, and all of the other things that come along with being in your 30s. Hey 30-something gang, welcome back to the In Your 30s podcast with your host Brendia Miller. Today we're going to be talking about something that has been on my mind for just a little bit, but it's something that I've been turning over and over in my mind because honestly, it feels like it challenges the way that we are taught to think about success and growth and maturity. It's the idea that learning things the hard way is a character flaw. We've all heard it, I'm sure. People have said, why do you always have to learn things the hard way? Why couldn't you just listen? Or even people just simply telling you directly that you do learn everything the hard way. I know personally, I've heard it my entire life. It's basically been my motto. And my family never fails to remind me that I learn every lesson the most difficult way possible. And there's this quiet undercurrent in our culture that says needing to struggle before you learn a lesson is a sign that you're emotionally immature, a sign that you're reckless, a sign that you're stubborn, and sometimes just a sign that you're not very wise in general. Like if you were really truly smart, you would have figured it out before it got messy, before you got hurt, before it got hard, before you knew what you knew, which generally makes no sense at all. And for a long time, I really actually did believe that in general about myself. And I thought that the fact that I had to stumble quite a bit, sometimes extremely hard with 2 skinned knees, before I finally learned a lesson meant that I was broken, that I was defective, that I was immature, that I was less evolved. But I would look at people who seemed to breeze through life, the ones who took advice the first time, who never seemed to hit rock bottom, and I would feel this shame. And I would keep this inside of me, and this shame just feels like a quiet scream inside of me that no one else can hear. Like maybe I missed something fundamental that they had just naturally figured out. Maybe my brain was just broken. Maybe I was just slow in the head. But here's the thing. I've learned so many of the most valuable life lessons that I could have possibly ever learned through my absolute hardest journeys, through all of the mistakes that I've made, which are plentiful, trust me, and through all of the heartbreaks and the tears and through choices that just didn't work out the way I hoped, which is about 98% of them on a good day. And honestly, some of it was very painful. And if I'm being honest, more times than not, it has been extremely painful and it has hurt me deep to the core. And some of it I probably could have avoided had I just listened to the people around me, listened to people who already had the wisdom and the advice and the experience. But would I have really ever learned the lesson that came from it if the lesson was just given to me? would I be the person I am today without those hard-won experiences? I've reached a point where, for me, it's hard to feel regret over the tough lessons because I can see how much they have shaped me. I can see how far they have brought me. I can see how much I have changed and the ways that I've matured that some of maybe my siblings, my friends, and, my peers have not. Not because I'm better than them, but because I've had to fight through so much more than most people I know. And I've had to fight through basically all of these experiences because, again, I learned the hard way. I have to learn a couple times. I give too many benefits of the doubt. I do all the things that they advise you not to do when you want life to go smoothly, okay? So today I want to explore that. I want to dive into the psychology of why learning through struggles creates a deeper and more lasting growth. I want to unpack why some people seem to need to learn the hard way while others do not. And I want to talk about why struggle, even though it feels brutal while you're in it, might actually be the most powerful catalyst for growth that we actually have. So let's go ahead and get into it. So let's go ahead and start with the science, because as it turns out, there is real psychological evidence to suggest that learning through struggle, the kind of learning that requires effort, resilience, and sometimes even failure, is one of the most effective ways to create long-term growth. The concept is known as desirable difficulties. And Dr. Robert Bjork, and I'm not sure how I pronounced that right, but I'm hoping, a cognitive psychologist at UCLA, coined this term to describe the idea that making learning more challenging instead of making it easier actually improves long-term retention and understanding. See, the thing about learning lessons is that it's not that we haven't been through the lesson and we don't know how it's going to turn out. It's that we fail to retain what comes from it. And sometimes when you retain it with an emotion, it helps you to understand the circumstance, the situation, or the lesson a lot better. So to understand why, we have to look at how memory and learning really works inside the brain. Because our brains are wired for efficiency. That's how they're wired. When we process new information, the brain wants to take the path of least resistance. It wants to conserve energy. So when you learn something quickly and very easily, your brain tends to treat it as surface level information. It's very subpar. It's not important. It's like writing something down on a piece of paper in pencil. You might need to erase it later. It might not be something you need to keep forever. But this memory is not very deep in comparison to the ones that we learn in our struggles. And it's easy to erase or even just simply override. But when you encounter difficulty, when learning requires extra effort, your brain shifts gears. It treats the information as important because the struggle signals to your brain that this information matters. Instead of writing it in pencil, your brain starts writing it in permanent ink. It's like when you're in school and they tell you can't write in pen, you have to use a pencil. Different things. So let's talk about some examples. Let's say you're studying for an exam. If you read the material once, then immediately ace a quiz on it, you might feel like you have substantially learned the material. But chances are that information is not going to stick. And even if it does, it may not stick in a long-term sense. Your brain processed it very quickly, and just as quickly, it'll probably slip away. In one ear, out the other. That's what they say. But if you struggle through the material, if you fail a few practice tests, if you have to dig deeper to figure it out, have to work through your frustrations and your anger, your brain is forced to engage more deeply and on a deeper level. And that effort is what creates a stronger neural connection, and that means that the information is going to stick with you for a much longer time. So this is where Dr. Bjork's idea of desirable difficulties comes in. When you face setbacks to struggle or grasp something at first, your brain is doing extra work. And that extra work is actually what helps build those neural connections and build stronger and more durable memories. His research shows that several specific types of desirable difficulties improve the learning outcomes. Learning over time instead of cramming. When you let time pass between learning sessions, your brain has to work harder to recall that information, and that effort strengthens that memory. Trying to recall information rather than simply reviewing it forces your brain to retrieve and recognize data, and it also helps to reinforce those neural pathways. Mixing different types of learning or problem solving together, which makes your brain work harder to identify the patterns and the solutions. This is called interleaving. And learning in different settings or contexts, which forces your brain to adapt and recognize the information under different circumstances. So, studying somewhere quiet, studying somewhere loud, studying somewhere, whatever it may be. Cold, warm, we've all heard people say that, temperature can help wake you up and help your brain and help you focus, and these are all things that his research shows can help improve different learning outcomes. And this is why people who learn the hard way often retain those lessons more deeply. When you've had to fight to figure something out, when you've made the wrong choice and faced the consequences, your brain is more likely to remember that experience and adjust your future behavior because of it. It's not just about intellectual learning. This applies to emotional and social learning as well. Think about relationships. You can tell someone over and over again that a certain type of partner is not good for them. You can lay out all the red flags. You can show them all the warning signs. But until they experience the pain of a toxic relationship firsthand, and until they feel the consequences of ignoring those red flags, the lesson really can't sink in. It's why you can give a teenager all the advice in the world, hand it to them on a silver platter about love and heartbreak and friendships, but they probably really won't understand it until they've had their heart broken for the first time. Because some lessons just cannot be taught with a checklist and some books. They have to be felt. And that's not because they're reckless or stubborn. It's because struggle activates the parts of the brain that solidify learning. Emotional pain creates the same kind of desirable difficulty as cognitive struggle. Your brain is encoding the experience as significant, so you don't make the same mistake again. That's why some of the hardest lessons in life, the heartbreaks we experience, the failures, the disappointments, stick with us so deeply. That's why it's sometimes so hard to move on and to release ourselves from the emotions of that situation. Our brains aren't just remembering the facts. They're remembering the emotional weight of the experience. And that is what makes learning last. Think of it as our emotions being the bricks in the road. And there's actually a neurological reason for this. When you go through something painful or difficult, your brain releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And these hormones heighten your emotional state, and they increase activity in the amygdala, which is the part of your brain responsible for processing your emotions and forming memories. That heightened emotional state makes the memory more vivid, and it makes it more likely to stick. It's why you can remember the details of your first heartbreak and your most embarrassing moment so clearly, even years later. It's why we remember the moments where people said things or did things that hurt us, even if they weren't significant to that person. But here's the key. Once the immediate emotional pain fades, the lesson still remains. Your brain has built a durable memory because the difficulty forced it to work harder, and it forced it to build and bridge that gap. And that's why learning the hard way is often more effective than learning it the easy way. So struggle isn't a flaw. It's a sign that your brain is doing deep work. It's a sign that your brain is working hard. And when you've had to learn the hard way, you're not just surviving the experience. You're wiring your brain for long-term growth. And that's actually really powerful. And let's be real, it's not just about intellectual growth. It's emotional growth too. Studies have shown that when people face challenges, whether it's failing at a job, navigating a difficult relationship, or recovering from a personal setback, they develop increased resilience and emotional intelligence. There's even a term for this. It's called post-traumatic growth, which is something that until this episode, until the research, I've never actually even heard of. But psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun introduced this concept to explain why some people emerge from trauma not just intact, but actually stronger. Post-traumatic growth refers to the positive psychological changes that may occur as a result of struggling with challenging life circumstances. Now, this idea is different from basic resilience, and resilience is just about bouncing back, returning to your baseline after a difficult experience. However, post-traumatic growth is about exceeding your baseline. It's not just about surviving the struggle, it's about thriving through it and because of it. Tedeschi and Calhoun's research identified 5 key areas where post-traumatic growth tends to occur. The first one is a greater appreciation for life. Usually after a traumatic or difficult event, people often report a deeper sense of gratitude for life's everyday moments. Surviving something difficult creates a shift in perspective. You start to appreciate things that you once took for granted. A good example of this is if you've ever seen The Good Place, where they go back and they rewind the timelines and everyone almost dies, but Michael comes in last minute and he saves everyone from their death, and they get to go on living their life, and they start making all these changes and this positive growth because they're so grateful that they almost died but didn't. Like, it's insane. But it's the perfect example of this, and this happens every single day in life, not just with, all near-death experience, but just every different part of our life. There's times where, we lose things. There's seasons where we go through loss, and we have to learn in those seasons that we are grateful for the things that we have left. And then usually what happens is when you survive that season, generally your next season is bountiful and it's full of abundance and it's blessed. But it's surviving that season and then learning from that season as well. Number 2 would be improved relationships with other people. Struggle can deepen your sense of connection with others. When you've been through something hard, you develop more empathy for other people's pain and their situations. Research shows that people who have gone through difficult experiences are more likely to be compassionate towards others and better at building meaningful relationships. There's also a bonding effect that happens when people help each other through hard times. Shared struggles create deeper emotional connections, whether it's a friendship forged in the trenches of a difficult job or a relationship strengthened by surviving a major setback, whatever it may be. These things can strengthen the bond if you can work through them properly and get through them. Number 3 will be new opportunities and possibilities. After experiencing a major challenge or a life-changing scenario, people often feel a shift in their sense of possibility. When the worst has already happened and you've survived it, you're more willing to take risks and try new things. Tedeschi's research shows that post-traumatic growth often leads to major life changes. People might start new careers, relocate to new places, or even pursue creative or personal passions that they wouldn't have ever even considered before. Difficulty forces you to reevaluate your priorities, and that helps you to create space for new possibilities and new opportunities. Number 4 is an increased personal strength. One of the most profound outcomes of struggle is the realization that you are stronger than you thought you were. People who experience post-traumatic growth often report a deeper sense of confidence in their ability to handle life's challenges. There's a psychological term for this, and it's called stress inoculation. Just like how a vaccine works by exposing your immune system to a weakened form of a virus so that it can build immunity, exposure to manageable levels of stress builds your psychological resilience. When you've faced hard things before, your brain learns how to regulate stress and how to problem solve more effectively the next time that you encounter a challenge. There have been so many times in my life that I thought I was not going to get through something and somehow got through it and came out feeling stronger, feeling like I actually could handle it so many times. And number 5 is a spiritual or existential change. Finally, post-traumatic growth often leads to a deeper sense of meaning or purpose. Struggle forces you to confront the deeper questions of life, like why am I here? What really matters to me? What kind of life do I want to live? It really helps us dig deep. Research shows that people who experience significant personal challenges often report increased spiritual awareness or a stronger sense of connection to something greater than themselves, whether it's through their religious faith, mindfulness, or simply a deeper connection to nature and the people around them. Tedeschi and Calhoun didn't just identify these patterns, they also discovered that the depth of growth is often more proportional to the level of struggle. In other words, the harder the experience, the greater the opportunity for growth is. Now, that doesn't mean that struggle automatically leads to growth every single time. Pain on its own doesn't make you stronger. But the way you respond to pain can lead to growth in your strength. And growth happens when you process the experience, make sense of it, and integrate it into your understanding of yourself and the world. This ties into another important concept in psychology, which is called meaning making. Dr. George Bonanno, a clinical psychologist at Columbia University, has studied trauma and resilience extensively. His research shows that the people who grow after adversity are the ones who engage in a process of making meaning out of their experiences. For example, someone who loses a job might reflect on that experience and realize that it gave them the freedom to pursue a career that they're really passionate about or have more time with their family. Or someone who experiences the loss of a loved one might channel that grief into advocacy work and creative expression. I've done that with the loss of my daughter, and I totally understand the concept of this personally. This process of meaning making helps to transform the emotional weight of the experience into something positive and constructive. It's not about erasing the pain, it's about using it to build a deeper sense of yourself. And that's why struggle, even when it feels brutal, can be so transformative. When you're forced to confront your own limits, to sit with failure or disappointment, you have two choices. You can let it define you and shrink you down to size, or you can let it sharpen you and shape you into someone stronger and more resilient. The process isn't easy. Post-traumatic growth does not happen overnight, and it's definitely not always linear. But over time, the hard lessons you've learned become part of your emotional and psychological foundation. You carry that strength with you into the next chapter of your life. I can see this so clearly in my own life in so many ways, and there have been times where I've lost friendships, faced setbacks that have felt completely devastating. I've lost loved ones, but when I look back now, I can see how each one of those experiences forced me to grow in different ways and in different things that I needed then. I've learned how to set boundaries. I've learned how to trust my gut. I learned how to stand up for myself. And that's the thing about learning the hard way. It's not just that you survive the experience. You grow from the experience. You become stronger. You become more self-aware and emotionally grounded beyond people that have it easier. And that struggle refines you. And that strength, the kind of strength that comes from weathering hard seasons and coming out the other side, is the kind of strength that stays with you. It becomes a part of who you are. There's another dimension to this as well, beyond memory, beyond resilience, and emotional strength, and that is your adaptability. People who have learned the hard way tend to be better at adjusting to new situations, navigating uncertainty, and problem solving under extreme pressure. This is because struggle doesn't teach you the lesson itself. It teaches you how to learn. It teaches you how to understand the lesson and take the lesson in. Psychologist Carol Dweck at Stanford University introduced the concept of the growth mindset. The idea that people who believe their abilities can be developed through effort and experience are more likely to succeed in the long run than those who believe their skills are fixed. Dweck's research shows that people with a growth mindset don't view failure as a reflection of their intelligence or their worth. They see it as an opportunity to improve. But here's the key. The growth mindset doesn't usually develop from success. It develops from struggle. And this is one thing I can really attest to. When you learn the hard way, you fail and have to pick yourself up. And a lot of the times, you have to do it on your own, just to be honest. And you start to internalize the idea that success isn't about being naturally talented or getting things right the first time. It's about persistence and adaptability. Struggle creates cognitive flexibility. One of the biggest advantages of learning through difficulty is that it improves cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift your strategies and adjust to new information and solve problems creatively. Neuroscientist Earl Miller at MIT studies cognitive flexibility and how the brain handles complex problem solving. Miller's research shows that when you encounter a setback or unexpected outcome, your brain's prefrontal cortex, the area that is responsible for planning and decision making, becomes more active. And this heightened activity helps your brain recognize patterns. It helps elevate different strategies, and it adjusts your approach based on new feedback. So, for example, imagine you've been following a specific strategy at work, and suddenly it's not working anymore. If you've never experienced failure before, if things have always come easy, your brain might struggle to adapt and figure out a solution. But if you've had to problem solve through failure before, your brain already knows how to pivot and try to logically find a way around the difficulty that you're experiencing. This is why people who have learned the hard way tend to excel in unpredictable environments. They're more uncomfortable with uncertainty because their brains have been trained to expect and respond to setbacks. It is basically muscle memory for your brain to need to pivot or to be on high alert for when that need is about to arise. In fact, research shows that people with more life challenges tend to develop better problem-solving skills and more creative thinking. A study by Angela Duckworth, the psychologist behind the concept of grit, found that people who persist through difficulty tend to perform better on complex cognitive tasks. Why? Because their brains have more experience handling setbacks and adjusting their strategies. They've built up a mental resilience and flexibility through repeated exposure to challenges in life. This ties into another psychological principle called the survivor effect. The idea that people who have faced significant setbacks but survive them tend to have a higher likelihood of long-term success. Economist John H. Cochran examined the effect in business and entrepreneurship. His research found that entrepreneurs who experienced business failures early in their careers were statistically more likely to succeed in their future endeavors. Why? Because those early failures taught them how to recognize their risks, how to make better decisions, and avoid the mistakes they made the first time. Take the story of Steve Jobs. Jobs was famously forced out of Apple, the company that he co-founded, in 1985. At the time, it was considered one of the biggest failures in the tech world. But Jobs later said that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to him. He went on to start Next, a company focused on higher education computing, and purchased Pixar from George Lucas. Next was eventually acquired by Apple, and the software it developed became the foundation for what we know as Mac OS. Pixar became one of the most successful animation studios in history. Jobs later reflected that the failure forced him to rethink his approach to leadership and product development, lessons that shaped his eventual success in transforming Apple into one of the most valuable companies in the world. And the survivor effect shows up in other fields too. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers before landing a deal for Harry Potter, FYI, my favorite book series. That initial rejection forced her to refine her manuscript and strengthen the story's core structure. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first TV job because the producer said she wasn't fit for television. That experience taught her to trust her own instincts and lean into her natural conversational style, which became the foundation for her entire media empire. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team, a moment that he later said fueled his work ethic and his competitive drive. And this is what makes learning the hard way so powerful. It's not just that you survive failure. It's that you extract the lessons from it. You become more aware of what works and what doesn't. You build mental toughness and emotional regulation, and you learn how to adjust and adapt without falling completely apart. There's another benefit to learning the hard way that goes beyond success and adaptability. It strengthens your sense of self. Psychologist Albert Bandura introduced the concept of self-efficacy, which is basically the belief in your ability to influence the outcome of events through your own actions. People with high self-efficacy tend to be more confident. These people are usually more motivated and more successful in the long run. But here's the thing. Self-efficacy isn't built through success alone. It's built through mastering difficulties. When you struggle and eventually succeed, when you push through failure and figure things out, you develop a sense of trust that is much deeper in yourself than you had before. You start to believe that you can handle whatever comes your way because you have literally proven it to yourself. This is why people who have faced hardship often have a much stronger sense of identity and emotional stability. They've been tested and they've seen firsthand that they can handle it. It's also why people who have faced setbacks are often better at handling stress and uncertainty. They know that discomfort isn't the end. It's just part of the process. They've learned how to regulate their emotions and trust their instincts, even when things feel chaotic. People who learn the hard way often carry an invisible advantage in life. They've built a deeper well of emotional strength and mental resilience than people who have had an easier path. Think about it this way. Two people start new jobs. Person A has an easy path, no major setbacks, and no big failures. Person B has been through multiple job losses, financial stress, and personal setbacks. When things get difficult at work, a challenging boss, a failed project, person A might crumble because they've never had to handle that level of adversity before. But person B, they've already faced worse and survived. They know how to stay calm, adjust their approach, and keep moving forward. That is the hidden advantage of learning the hard way. You build a kind of quiet confidence, not because life has been easy, but because you've already faced hard things and you've come out stronger in the end. And that kind of strength stays with you. It's the difference between hoping you can handle life's challenges and knowing that you can. That's why learning the hard way isn't a flaw. It's a strength. A quiet, powerful strength that shapes not only what you know, but also who you are. It's so funny because my husband has been a car salesman for years. And we talk about this concept all the time anyways because he has dealt with so much in the business. Like, he's truly had some crappy managers and worked at some crappy places. And so there's a lot of times when he will be working somewhere and they'll hire people and people will ask for opinions or, information on the job on their first couple of days. And like just from the actual sales staff, not, the managers. And people will be like, dude, good luck working here. It's hell. Like, Honestly, it's so funny to me because we talk about this so much. And there is a lot of times where I have noticed, because he has worked in more difficult situations at dealerships that didn't necessarily have the best management, or the management just like treated you like crap, talked down on you, then he has been able to endure other work environments that are the same way, that people sometimes honestly just get too overwhelmed with. And so it's a wild concept to learn and to be able to see in real time, in real life. Now, one of the most complicated aspects of learning the hard way is how we process the regret. Sometimes the lack of regret. And conventional wisdom tells us that regret is a negative emotion. It's something that we should avoid at all costs. But when you've learned the hard way, regret can take on a very different shape. It's not always something you want to erase, because sometimes the difficult path is the one that shaped you the most. Understanding regret and its psychological function is so very important. And psychologists define regret as a counterfactual emotion. It's an emotion that arises when we reflect on how things could have gone differently. In other words, regret is born from comparison between what actually happened and what could have happened. And you know what they say, comparison is the thief of joy. Can I get an amen, hallelujah? Amen, hallelujah. Thank you, thank you. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, known for his work on decision-making and behavioral economics, has explored the cognitive underpinnings of regret. Kahneman's research shows that regret is closely tied to the concept of loss aversion, the idea that people feel the pain of loss more intensely than the pleasure of gain. When we experience regret, our brains are essentially trying to avoid that pain by mentally rehearsing different outcomes. If I had done this instead of this, things would be better. We've all said it. We've all been in a situation that's made us feel that way. But here's where learning the hard way creates a little bit of a shift. If the difficult experience ultimately leads to growth, if it makes you stronger, wiser, or even more resilient, the feeling of regret is often softened or even absent altogether. That's because the emotional cost of the mistake is balanced out, or even possibly outweighed by the value of the growth that has followed. Dr. Janet Landman, a psychologist who specializes in the study of regret, makes an important distinction between regret and reflection. So she says that regret is backward facing. It focuses on what you wish you would have done differently, what you would change about the situation, what you would want to replace out of the choices that you made. Reflection is forward facing. It focuses on how the experience shaped you and what you actually learned from it and how you grow from it. And it really just focuses on the positive and the gain. When people learn the hard way, they tend to shift from regret to reflection over time. It's not overnight. It's definitely over time. And they stop focusing on the mistake itself and start focusing on how the experience made them stronger. And sometimes it can take us a little while to really see how an experience made us stronger or benefited us. For example, someone who stayed in a toxic relationship for too long might initially regret wasting those years. But as they process the experience, they might shift towards reflection, recognizing that the relationship taught them how to set boundaries, how to recognize red flags, and maybe even how to advocate for their emotional needs in future relationships. The growth that comes from learning the hard way transforms the emotional weight of regret into wisdom. The mistake stops being a source of pain, it becomes a source of strength. Interestingly, research shows that people who experience meaningful growth after a difficult experience are often less prone to long term regret. Psychologist Neil Rossi at Northwestern University has studied the long term psychological impact of regret, and Rossi's research shows that people who are able to extract meaning from the difficult experiences that they go through are more likely to feel at peace with the choices they make, even if those choices cause them pain or difficulty in a short-term experience. So make sure you peep how that says short term, because it's not necessarily going to have the same results on someone who has caused themselves pain or difficulty in a very long term experience. But in the short term, basically, even if the situation causes you discomfort or puts you in a situation that you're not comfortable in and causes you pain or difficulty, say you choose to get out of a bad relationship and you have to now move and you have to stay on someone's couch, and it is difficult and it's uncomfortable and it's not fun to be, the person slumming on the couch. But in the long term, you'll get your own place and you'll have your own place that has peace, and maybe, there won't be fights and arguments, and whatever was toxic about your relationship will no longer linger in this place, and it will be a place of peace for you. And so for people who find the greater meaning and find a better meaning from the things that they go through, like, okay, yeah, I have to go through all of this stuff, but at the end of it, I do get peace, is more likely to feel at peace with the choices they make. Like, okay, well, I don't really regret leaving, and I'm going to see it through, and I'm going to stay on this couch, and I'm just going to, get myself in the position I want to be in, instead of focusing on how this could have been a mistake, because you're going to look and see that you have something to gain. When you extract meaning from difficult moments, you understand that the struggle has a victory for you in some way. And this is why people who have learned the hard way often say things like, I wouldn't change what happened because it made me who I am today. This idea might sound counterintuitive. Why wouldn't you want to avoid pain if you could? But Rosie's research shows that the sense of strength and self-awareness that comes from surviving a difficult experience often outweighs the desire to rewrite the past. And as someone who has personally endured a lot of pain and suffering and learned a lot of things the hard way, and should probably have a mountain of regrets behind her, I actually truly can see and understand how this is something you would feel, because I personally am one of those people who say I wouldn't change a thing. I did something, I put myself in a situation, I went through a situation, whatever the case may be, but while it caused me an issue in the moment, while it caused me a hard season, it created me and it molded me and it pulled me into an uncomfortable situation where my only choice was to grow. And sometimes that's what it takes for us to get the growth that we need and the growth that we deserve. It's the hard times, and it's the mistakes, and it's the situations, and it's the ways that we allow people to take advantage of us, and we have to learn the lessons from that the hard way. And so for so many people, myself included, this is very common. And sometimes this is just where the growth is able to happen, because for us, it's not able to happen in other environments for us. It just isn't. And it's not that people don't see the mistakes. We see them clearly, very clearly. Actually, generally, we see them more clearly than most people see their mistakes. But we also can see the growth that came from those mistakes. And for many people, that growth is more valuable than the comfort of an easier path. And the thing about it is, I am related to so many people who would rather take the easy path and not grow. And so for them, I do learn the hard way, and I've heard it my whole life, but I have grown so much because of it. And I do think every single day how grateful I am for the struggles that I have endured, because when I look at the life that I want to lead, I'm leading it, and I'm growing every day, and it's improving even when it's hard. Take the example of Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love. Good book. Such a good movie too. Gilbert has spoken openly about the personal turmoil that inspired her journey, the painful divorce, and the emotional breakdown that forced her to reevaluate her entire life. Would she have preferred to avoid that pain? Yeah, probably. But she's also said that the person she became after surviving the experience is stronger. That person's more grounded. That person is more self-aware. And that person is someone that she deeply values. And without that struggle, she would not have become that person. She would not have had the opportunity to grow. This is why some of the most profound and personal transformations happen, not in spite of difficult experiences, but because of them. But what about the times when regret does linger? Because there are times where our mistakes can haunt us. The times that feel like they left scars rather than wisdom. And if truth be told, this is where things kind of get nuanced. Regret tends to stick around when you haven't fully processed the emotional fallout from the mistake. It tends to linger when the consequences of the mistake are still affecting your life in very tangible ways, like financial loss or damaged relationships. And it can haunt you if you have not found a way to create meaning or growth from the experience at that point. Psychologist Melanie Greenberg calls this the unfinished story effect. When an experience feels unresolved, when you haven't had the chance to make sense of it or get the closure that you feel like you need, or even just grow from it, your brain tends to keep looping back to it, trying to fix it retroactively and finish the story. This is why things like therapy, journaling, and self-reflection can be so helpful after a difficult experience. Different tools and techniques can help us cope and help us get out of the loop of trying to fix it, and help us process the emotional weight of the mistake. It can help us find a way to make sense of it. It helps you shift from regret to reflection. And it's not about denying that the mistake ever happened. It's about reclaiming the story around it. Not rewriting, reclaiming. Instead of seeing it as a failure and allowing disappointment to take over the story and build within you, you start to see it as a turning point. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who has messed up, you start to see yourself as someone who grew from a very hard experience and who made steps to change, improve, and step into a different season. This ties into the broader psychological theory that regret is often reduced when people feel like their suffering had a purpose. If the hard lesson ultimately shaped you into a stronger, more capable person, you're less likely to view it as a mistake. And I think a lot of times we will hear people say, well, everything happens for a reason. And that is people's way of justifying it for a greater reason. Even if they don't actually have a specific reason, it's just a way for people to cope with the hard lesson and the growth that is coming from it. Again, this is why, many people say, they wouldn't change a thing even after facing major setbacks like financial struggles like foreclosures, losing everything, relationship failures, divorces, career disappointments, or losing careers altogether. And they still would say they would do it all again because it made them. It's never because the experience wasn't painful. And just because people find joy in pain and painful and hard seasons doesn't mean that it wasn't heavy. But it's because the person they become as a result of that struggle is someone they value. It's because of what they gained from the struggle outweighed the struggle. And this is where the hidden gift of learning the hard way becomes clear. This is where you learn that it really is a gift. It's not just that you survive the experience. It's that the experience remakes you into something stronger and wiser and more resilient. And it molds you. And it is really a beautiful thing because everybody does not get to experience that. Some people make mistake and mistake and mistake and mistake and mistake, and they never learn. And they never grow. And it never molds them into anything more. It really is a gift to be the person that everyone sees learning the hard way. Because 9 out of 10 times those people are not learning. And that's where their criticism for the way that you are comes from. So is it really a bad thing to be someone who learns the hard way? I don't think so. Because when you've learned the hard way, you know what you're made of. You've faced yourself. You have faced your darkness. You have faced your demons. You have faced your limits. You have made your mistakes. And you have grown through them. And when you've done that, there's very little in life that can shake you. I promise you that. And that's the power of learning the hard way. That is the gift. It's not just that you know more. It's that you trust yourself more. You've seen yourself survive hard things. And for some of us, it's been things we thought we would never survive. And that creates a level of self-confidence that no easy path could possibly ever give you. It's deep rooted inside of you, and it's something that your brain has a lot harder time forgetting. And that's why when you really think about it, regret might be overrated. Because the person you became on the other side of the struggle might just be the person you were always meant to be. I used to think I should regret the choices that led me to the hard lessons, but I don't. I really don't. Because the truth is, those experiences have shaped me into the person I am today. And would I really be the person I am now if I had never fallen on my face a few times? If I had never lost it all? Would I have the same depth of understanding about life? Would I have the same emotional strength even on my weakest days? No, I don't personally think so. And honestly, I'm proud of that, and so should you. You should be very proud of the way that you learn and the way that you grow. No matter how hard people may think your path may be, It's your path, and it's meant to make you. Thank you for spending time with me today. If this resonated with you, if you're someone who's learned the hard way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, learning the hard way might just be the best thing that's actually ever happened to you. Be grateful for it today. Bye.